presence absence survey where, am I hearing the species or not? And we've learned a lot over the years from doing the survey, and that's what I wanted to share with you today, because you can do a survey like this anywhere in the world, and it's just a great way to connect people. Some of the things we've learned is that, you need to provide some information. You really want to keep the survey simple so anybody can do it. Partners are important. Our organization doesn't have a lot of resources, so we had the county helped us with maps. Some of our volunteers actually helped with an app that I'll show you in a few minutes. And then lastly, support your volunteers because they will become your best advocates. So when we started the survey, we had to design some materials. We have a training manual that goes over, why they're doing the survey, the value of wetlands, all our different species of frogs and toads and their calls, and then what the proper conditions are for going out and doing your surveys and all that, the protocol. We also created a CD. Actually, we started this in '98. It was a tape. Now we have a CD. We also have a podcast, and we even have an app. We have a very simple form that people fill out every time they go out. And then we also provide a sign. So if they're in their car parked somewhere, that they can show that to the authorities. And I also did mention that quite a few of my surveyors are listening today. So really excited about that. And in fact, one of my surveyors was the one who invited me to be here today because she's been involved with Save the Frogs for many years. So the prior information that we provide is, the basics on wetlands and their value. And then we go over our 8 species of frogs and toads. We don't have that many here. We talk about what they look like, although they don't have to see them to do the survey, the wetlands that they're found in, what they prefer, when they start calling. And then we show them a map of our results where they're found in the watershed. So this map, you see the green squares are where they've been heard. You might notice that this white area is devoid of frogs and toads. That's the west side of Detroit, where it's so urbanized there aren't any wetlands left. So then we play the calls, and to help them remember the calls, we do things like, oh, well, that sounds like a jingle bell or like a rubber band. The American toad sounds more like a trill. So hopefully you can hear that okay. It's one of my favorite calls. It's the most common one in the watershed. And sometimes kids tell me it's kind of scary. I love the idea of doing a frog chorus with people. Basically, we're trying to teach people to be advocates for wetlands. And so we do cover this in our workshop about the importance. And in Michigan, we've lost 50% of our wetlands. And if you look at this map in the lower part of the state where we're focused around this lower thumb area, the red areas have lost more like 80%. And in Wayne County, where we're working, it's 90%. So we talk about the wetland protection laws that we have, but basically we need them to advocate for these laws to be enforced, especially in this climate. If nobody advocates for the frogs, these laws will not be enforced. We need people to save the frogs. So this is our very simple form that we use. They provide some basic information about the survey block that they're doing, the location, and the types of wetlands they have, their name, and then each time they go out, the date, the time, the conditions, and just check off which species they're hearing. Very simple survey, doesn't take a lot of time. We ask them to go out twice a month after dark. And people go out, anywhere from 6 to 8 times in the survey season, which is from March to June. Some people get so excited about this that they go out, every single night. Our survey is one of the most concentrated in the country because our amphibians are very few and far between. So we use the grid system of township range section, and we assign them a quarter square mile block. When new volunteers come, we ask for their address and we try to assign something very close to them that has wetlands. And this shows you some of the data that we have. We provide them with a map, which is an aerial photo with the rivers and wetlands overlaid. And volunteer support is one of the things that's the most critical to this survey. So we put people on an email list and we send out reminders. You need to go out and survey. And then, we say, hey, spring peepers are calling here. Get them excited about it. And also, when possible, we hold group listens where they can come to some spot in the watershed where we know there's a lot of species and they can meet other surveyors and practice the calls. Communication, people love to talk about frogs, and all you need to do is listen. And sometimes it's not just about the frogs. They want to tell you a story. Sometimes it's about other things. But this is the way that we're connecting with people. And when you support people like that, when you listen to them, especially during this pandemic, I had one surveyor say, well, now that my husband has recovered from COVID-19, now we can get back to surveying. Or I'm so happy because I'm in the house with my kids all day. This is such an excellent experience for me to be able to go out and listen for frogs and toads. And these volunteers will come back year after year. They will become members of your organization. They will become your funders. And I have plenty of kids who started doing this survey when they were young and chose a career in science because of the experience. So we've adapted to an online form, and I know I don't have a whole lot of time, but I just wanted to show you, this is an app that one of my volunteers designed for us because she had a hard time remembering the calls. She calls it Froggy Voice. And it's just a really simple little thing where you can click on a frog and it'll play the call. You might hear a lot of frogs at one time, so you can click on several different species and then try to pick them out. And she drew the frogs to show the major characteristics that our frogs have, and there's also information about the species. I'm going to have to go back to my presentation, and I know I'm getting pretty short on time. So this is showing you our participation over time. The green is participation, and the blue is the data that we got back from the survey blocks, the number. And we vastly increased the participation, but we didn't always get the follow through. So we scaled back a little bit. And in more recent times, we've struggled with funding, but that's really changing. And we have so many people this year who want to do the survey because it's something they can do. So in closing, we desperately need ways to connect people back to nature, and doing a listening survey like this is such a nice way to engage people as citizen scientists. They will become your supporters. They will become lifelong Save the Frogs members. So I don't know if I have any time for questions, but I'd be happy to take a few questions.
Thanks so much, Sally. Why don't you go ahead and stop your screen share? And I want to say that was a fabulous presentation, and I can tell that you have a ton of experience with this because you go into such detail, even such things like giving people proof that they're out there doing a survey in case the authorities say something. So
yeah, we've had a few issues with that. I personally too have had, the flashing lights pulled over and the Wayne County Sheriff's there. So we actually even send letters out now.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that's just one detail that struck me that, I like how you've thought all of this out. And I do agree. The more you get people volunteering for your organization, they will move up the chain and become donors and lifelong supporters and spread the word and all kinds of things. And I also want to say a huge thank you to Margaret Breeden, who is out there and who is a member of Friends of the Rouge, and she helped me organize this entire World Summit. So thank you to Margaret. We are out of time, so thank you, Sally, so much.
Thank you so much, and I did mean to mention her in the beginning. Thank you so much, Margaret, for inviting me to be here. It's just wonderful to be part of this, and thank you, Carrie.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
So let's see. We have Dr. Federico Cacoliris coming at us from Argentina. And Federico, you should now have control, so feel free to share your screen. Let's do a quick voice test too. Say a few things before you start. I just want to make sure audio is coming through.
Hello, do you hear me well?
I hear you well, so you're all good to go. You can open this full screen if you want, if you have not already done that. And buenos dias, bienvenidos.
Thank you, Kerry. Hello, everybody. And thank you very much to Save the Frogs and to Kerry for inviting us. and to giving us the opportunity to share our conservation work. My name is Federico Cacoliris, and I am from Argentina. And in this presentation, I will share with you some things about our conservation project entitled Recovering the Critically Endangered Rincon-stream frog in Patagonia, Argentina. I am a biologist from La Plata University, and most of my work experiences were related to conservation projects of endangered species. I started my conservation career working in the Great Chaco of South America in a management project with the blue-fronted parrot. In 2004, I started my PhD about the ecology of an endemic and endangered sand dune lizard. And some years later, I participated in a conservation project in Bolivia. I made at protecting the blue trout macaw, a critical endangered species also. And during this project, during these experiences, I realized that about the importance of protecting the most endangered species in the wild. And that was one of the main reasons I decided to continue my conservation career working with amphibians. There's no need to repeat about the critical situation that are facing amphibians worldwide, but it's worth to mention that Argentina is not an exception to this problematic. When I started working in amphibian conservation, there were 3 species of amphibians listed as critical endangered in the IUCN Red List. This is the highest threat category. These species were Telmatobius atacamensis, Alsodes pehuenche, and el Rincon-stream frog, or Pleurodema somuncurense. Today, we have 7 critical endangered species in our country, and several endangered and vulnerable amphibian species. But among them, the Rincon-stream frog is the most threatened, at least in my point of view. So in 2012, we decided to create the Wild Plateau Initiative. We created this initiative with a team of committed people. And our main goal was to conserve endemic and endangered species from the SOMUNCURA plateau, mainly the Rincon-stream frog, but also an endangered fish, and another frog living in the lagoons of the high plateau. Later, this goal was updated, and now the focus of the initiative is to protect the whole biodiversity of the SOMUNCURA plateau through awareness raising, sustainable development, and rewilding management. That means habitat restoration and species recovery. So I will start introducing you to El Rincon-stream frog, and we'll talk about how we contributed to this species information with the aim of updating its conservation status. El Rincon-stream frog is a microendemic species, is an almost wholly aquatic species that is only known to occur in a small stream located in the SOMUNCURA Plateau in Patagonia, Argentina. This area was recognized as an important biodiversity site by the Alliance for Zero Extinction, and also was recognized as important bird area, and it was also declared as natural reserve by the local government. And the plateau is a magic and beautiful place with incredible landscapes and full of endemic and charismatic species. In the pictures, you can see cougars, Andean condors, South American camelids or guanacos. And also you can find there a lot of endemic lizards. The plateau encompasses a big portion of the north of Patagonia in Argentina, and in the northeastern edge, see the red point in the left map, there occur the Valcheta stream that is shown in the right map. And the Valcheta stream, as you can see, is an isolated watercourse that burns and ends in the plateau, having no contact with other watercourses in the area, nor with the sea. And the headwaters of this stream burn at hot springs. Thus, the headwaters have hot waters all the year, which is uncommon for a Patagonian stream. And this feature allows with the evolution of several species, including the Rincon-stream frog, the naked characin, and several freshwater snails. The Rincon-stream frog was discovered in 1960 based on two subpopulations, the ones marked in yellow in the map. And until 2006, only 6 subpopulations were known, these ones. In 2012, when we started working with these species, we conducted exhaustive surveys covering the whole stream, and we discovered not only 3 new subpopulations, but the biggest ones in the wild. However, we also realized that at least 2 of the subpopulations previously known went extinct during this time frame. And looking for the causes related to these extinctions, we found that the habitat where these subpopulations used to occur were extremely disturbed by cows. These cows trample and feed on aquatic vegetation, which is key for frogs as reproductive habitat and also as shelter to avoid predators. Sorry. But we also wondered why the frogs were restricted just to a few sites in the stream and not thriving all along the headwaters. And we found that all the sites where frogs were absent were full of trout. The trout is an invasive predator in this stream that was introduced in 1920, previous to the discovering of this frog. And the thing is that trout predates on frogs. And we found a negative effect of trout on the occupancy of frogs and toads in the Valcheta stream. But white trout were not predating on the last subpopulations of frogs. I mean the ones still in yellow. That's because these last subpopulations are protected by the existence of natural waterfalls that impede the access of trout upstream to these barriers. So this is a summary of the conclusions of the conservation status assessment we conducted. We found that the Rincon-stream frog is present in small and isolated subpopulations. These frogs, these subpopulations are cornered by trout to small areas. And even in these areas where frogs were expected to thrive, they are declining because the habitat is being disturbed by cows. And all these threats already caused some extinctions to date. So having an updated assessment of the conservation status of the species, our next step was to start planning an action plan for it. Our first actions in this way were to meet with several stakeholders, including park rangers, local authorities, local farmers, and other people from the local community, which helped us to build an objectives tree to identify the main requirements for this species. And as a result of these objective trees, we understood that in order to get viable populations of frogs, again, we would have to remove threats and to restore habitats. So we started testing different management, different solutions to face each specific problem affecting the frogs. And to do so, we applied a methodology that is known as adaptive management. However, we failed when assuming that a restored habitat would be enough to allow the recovery of frogs. I mean, this relation the recovery of frogs wouldn't happen because even when habitat become restored, the frogs could not reach it, because to do so, they should cross from its current habitat through an intermediate habitat full of trout and reach its new restored habitat without being predated in the way. So while we were removing the trout from intermediate habitat, a process that could delay several years, we decided to help frogs to reach restored habitats by incorporating a reintroduction component in our project. Our next concern was related to moving frogs from the wild subpopulations to the restored habitat, because in order to have success when moving frogs to a new habitat, you have to move a lot of individuals. I mean, hundreds of them, but the wild subpopulations were too small and we were worried about taking too many individuals from them. But if we take a few frogs and we reproduce them in captivity, we could have enough individuals to reintroduce without affecting the wild subpopulations. So in 2014, together with Professor Jorge Williams, we created Cururu, the first program for the rescue of endangered amphibians in our country. And with support from the Amphibian Act, we built the first ex situ facilities for the El Rincon-stream frog in the herpetological laboratory of La Plata Museum that is placed in La Plata City. And in this place, we emulated the wild conditions to create an ex situ habitat for this frog. And we established a survival colony of the Rincon-stream frog in captivity by moving only 40 individuals from the wild. This ex situ colony allowed us to continue learning about the species reproduction, and we could record the mating call of this species by the first time. This is how it sounds. And a year after the establishment of the frogs in the ex situ facilities, we got the first clutches of this species in ex situ conditions, the first eggs of a Rincon-stream frog in captivity. And then we could follow the entire metamorphosis process from the eggs to the tadpoles, and then to the froglets. Then we identified each froglet by marking them with visible implant elastomers. And in the meanwhile, we continued with the habitat restoration activities, which included the creation of enclosures to avoid the access of cows to key habitats, as a way to allow the restoration of the habitat. We also created temporary dams by increasing small natural waterfalls in order to avoid the access of trout upstream. And we remove trout from intermediate habitat through electrofishing techniques. So this is how it looks, a habitat previous and after our interventions, previous and after our management. And you can see the degree of recovery of the vegetation in the right picture. This is what it happens when you avoid the access of cows to the habitat. And the right picture shows a very good habitat for a Rincon-stream frog, full of vegetation, full of reproductive habitat, and full of shelter. So this was the situation in 2012. In 2016, we successfully restored this habitat. So we were able to continue to the next step of the project, I mean the reintroduction of frogs there. In 2017, we conducted the first reintroduction experience in this restored habitat, and we translocated 200 individuals, including froglets and tadpoles, from our ex situ facilities to the restored habitat. And we invited local authorities, local community and farmers and children from the local school to participate in this event. Each child named a frog and released it. So in future monitoring, since frogs were marked, we were able to tell him how much the froglet has grown. In 2018, We conducted the second reintroduction experience in the same habitat. We released 50 froglets as a way to reinforce this new subpopulation. We then made monitoring to see if the released froglets become adapted to its new habitat. And a year after, we found the first eggs from the released frogs in the restored habitat. And we followed them until they became froglets. So we were very happy because we confirmed that the released frogs were now fully established in the restored habitat. So the subpopulation that used to live there in the past and became extinct was now again living in this site. So we went from this situation to this new one. And moreover, thanks to our habitat restoration activities, we also allowed the expansion of another subpopulation, this one, that is now living in a bigger habitat. In 2019, we restored this habitat and a new reintroduction was planned for March 2020, but it has to be postponed because of the outbreak of the COVID-19. So we hope to continue this activity at the end of this year. The good news was that also in 2019, we got support from the amphibian arc again that allowed us to improve our ex situ facilities. So we created new and better spaces for the survival colony of this frog. These new ex situ facilities were created in a container laboratory, as you can see in the left picture. And now we have a lot of tadpoles and froglets there that are planned to be part of the next reintroduction event. You can see there our tadpoles. Some froglets, more froglets. More tadpoles. And the adult frogs. So to finish, I want to share with you our main vision for this species. We have a clear goal that is to save this species from extinction. So we have a detailed schedule to do so. We follow an action plan that ends in 2025. By then, we expect to go from this point to this one. And based on our researches, we are confident that if we achieve this goal, the Rincon-stream frog will survive in the long term. Of course, all this work is possible thanks to a committed team of people, to name some of them: Jorge Williams, Melina Velasco, Tomás Martínez, María Luz Arellán, Ornella, Rodrigo, Agustina, Camila, Nico, Germán, Igor, Sofia, Hernán Povedano, Mauro Rosas, and Belén Tenorio, among others. But also we receive support of a lot of institutions and donors who trust in us and follow our vision. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to Save the Frogs for giving us this space to share with you.
All right, Dr. Federico Cacoliris, muchas gracias. Fabulous efforts down in Argentina. Thank you so much, and thank you for educating the Save the Frogs community about what you are doing.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
If people have questions, send them in. We do have one question about trout, and that is, are the trout considered to be important for tourism?
Yes, trout are important for tourism because a lot of tourists visit Patagonia with the aim of fishing trout. So our plan is to remove trout just from the headwaters of the stream in order to maintain the habitat for frogs free of trout, but people can fish the trout downstream outside of the habitat of the frogs. So yes, the trout are very important for tourism.
All right, thanks. And did you run into obstacles with the farmers when you wanted to fence the grazing areas?
Yes, of course. We made with them personal agreements, and we just fence small areas of the stream, so we do not affect their local economy with this management. We just maintain small sanctuaries for frogs reproductions. But of course, all these managements are made with their agreement. Something happens.
I am here. I'm just looking through the questions. There's a question, is it known how inbred these populations are?
They are probably something inbred because there is a natural small population, but we are not seeing any negative effect of inbreeding among the froglets, at least now. So this is not our main concern right now. Our main concern is to protect the habitat and to remove the trout from intermediate habitat.
All right, so we have arrived at our break time. So a huge thank you to Federico and a thank you to all the presenters. Keep your questions coming in. Federico, you're welcome to look through some of these questions and perhaps type in a short response. I'm going to leave this Zoom event going right now. We're going to take a 15-minute break, but feel free, people, if y'all want to chat amongst yourselves, you can do that. Otherwise, take a break, and we're going to be right back with another round of Save the Frogs World Summit presentations, specifically beginning with Stephen Alleyne from the UK. And then we've got Elliot, Connor, Gilbert, Adams, Sandra, Wusu, Jemphi, and more coming up. So thanks again, and I will see everyone back here in about 13 minutes. If you want to take this break, everyone, and get on your social media and share this event happening, savethefrogs.com/summit, that would be awesome. And also, as I chatted in before, I believe all of this is now streaming live through YouTube, embedded in savethefrogs.com/summit towards the top of the page. So it's another place to view it, but we like having you here. 54 of you right now. We hit a high of 70 people. So I'll see you all back here shortly. Hello, Stephen. Stephen Alleyne, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear and see me?
I sure can. How's it going?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Why don't you go ahead and open up your screen if you have a screen to share?
Sure.
And the hour has struck. So we have returned to the Save the Frogs World Summit in celebration of the 12th annual Save the Frogs Day, which is the last Saturday of April. So depending on where in the world you are, it may already be Save the Frogs Day. Regardless, it's Save the Frogs Day Eve everywhere. So we have Stephen Alleyne. Tell us about the conservation of amphibians in the UK, Stephen.
Okay, I shall do. So, hello everybody, and thank you for the invite, Kerry. I just want to start by saying that, yeah, Save the Frogs Day is generally well timed in my case because my birthday is the end of April. So, yeah, sometimes it falls on my birthday, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm going to talk to you guys this evening about conservation of amphibians here in the UK, in both a general scheme of things as well as stuff that I've been involved with through the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Amphibian and Reptile Group since 2012-2013. So first of all, I've just got some quick numbers to get you in the mood of things. And currently, at the moment, only 7 native amphibian species are recognised in the UK. We've got 2 frogs, 2 toads, and 3 newts. 3 of those species are legally protected and are the subject of national conservation concern and efforts to restore their populations. But as well as all of the native species, we also have quite a few introduced species as well, mostly from Europe via the pet trade or stowaway reintroduction and stowaway introductions, and also intentional introductions into the wild. So I thought I'd show you guys this map, which highlights why the UK has such a depauperate assemblage of both reptiles and amphibians. And the reason being is during the last glacial maximum, most of the country was under ice. And that meant that only the hardiest species could move into the southern part of England, where there was it's thought that there was a tundra-like environment here, where the wildlife had a few refuge where it could escape the cold and the chill. And then as the ice retreated, sea levels rose, and we got cut off as an island. So we were stuck with the species that were here when the waters rose, which is why we have such a small number of amphibian species. So I'm just going to give you a rundown of all of the species, and then we'll go into the conservation. So the first of these is the common frog, and as you can probably guess by its name, it's very widespread across the country in both the UK and Ireland, and it's the amphibian that most people grew up seeing when they were a child here in the UK. A lot of classrooms, particularly with young children, raise frog spawn from local ponds and then put their tadpoles back in the ponds once they've metamorphosed into froglets. And this is really the first introduction that most children get to amphibians in the UK, unless they have a pond in their garden or see them in a local environment. These guys are generally doing okay at the moment, but they are under threat from some diseases and stuff that I'll come back to later on. Then we have the common toad, again very widespread here in the UK, but only found on the British mainland. It's not found in Ireland. And these guys, unfortunately, at the moment, are going through serious declines in the UK. Some research published in 2016 showed that over the 30 years preceding that time, the common toads declined by 68%. So, they're suffering real declines. One of the reasons for this is possibly that because they're seen as a common species, because they're least concern on the IUCN Red List, and because their ubiquitous in the environment is that their habitats are being destroyed and degraded without any sort of recognition that their populations are declining. And again, because we're an island or a nation of islands, it's hard for species to recolonize from the continent, where if we were still connected, they could easily do that. Then we move on to the natterjack toad, which is one of the rarest amphibians in the UK. and they used to be quite widespread across coastal dune systems up and down the country, as well as in Ireland. And because of development of the dunes and also of coastal erosion, succession, all of the usual suspects, their populations have declined, although they have been reintroduced into a number of sites. And hopefully their ongoing conservation will mean that they will spread into some of the former areas of their range. But at the moment, it's a bit tough to try to introduce them into areas where the habitat isn't suitable anymore. So there's ongoing habitat restoration taking place as we speak. Not currently right now because of the coronavirus situation, but hopefully once the quarantines are lifted, that we'll be able to get back out there and help save these guys. So the final endurant is the pool frog, and these guys have a very interesting history. So pool frogs are one of the introduced amphibians into the UK, but in Europe they have two clades, a southern clade and a northern clade. And the southern clade frogs are generally more green in colour, whereas the northern clade ones are more brown, with that dorsal stripe you see running down that guy's back. And the southern clade pool frogs are the ones that have been introduced. It's the northern clade ones that complicate matters slightly. The last known place that they were found in Norfolk, on the border between the Bracks and the Broads. The last male that went extinct in the late 90s, and using genetics, using some zoo archaeology as well as some bioacoustics, it was eventually discovered that these guys were native and they weren't aliens after all. And so in the early 2000s, a reintroduction program was initiated, and it's still ongoing now. And this started with a wild to wild reintroduction program from frogs from Sweden, which are identified as the closest genetic match to the frogs we had here in the UK. And since then, there has been ongoing head starting and tadpoles as well. Then we move on to the newts, and so as I said earlier, there are 3 species of newts in the UK, and the smooth newt is probably the most widespread of those. These guys are generally found in lowlands. They like more alkaline soils and ponds, and they're quite ubiquitous throughout the country, although there are some areas where they aren't found just because the geology doesn't favor them. These guys grow only up to 10 centimeters in length. They're nothing too big, and as you can see, the males have this nice smooth jagged crest that they use to attract females. Then we move on to the palmate newt, which is a very similar looking species, and they can be confused from time to time, particularly the females. The females of both species look almost identical. It's only really by flipping them over and looking at their chin that you can tell whether or not they're a palmate newt. Palmate newts have a plain pink skin tone colour under their chin with no spots, whereas smooth newts have a more whitey yellow under chin with spots. Unfortunately, the newts don't always read the guidebooks, and there can be some contention between ID, but there's other ways to identify them too. And the males, like this guy, are palmate newts. In the breeding season, develop the black hind feet you can see here, and at the end of his tail, just out of shot, is a thin filament which isn't always there, which again is another sexual characteristic they develop to be able to attract females and spread pheromones in the water to breed. Then we move on to the final amphibian native to the UK, which is the great crested newt. And these guys are quite large. They can grow up to 20 centimeters in length, so they're twice the size of the other 2 species I've just shown you. And the males have this glorious crest. These are one of the species that are protected by law, along with the natterjack toad and the pool frog. And despite that these guys are quite widespread, they've declined massively in recent years. So when I say recent, I mean since the 1950s, as have all of our amphibians, but these guys especially so. One of the reasons for this is a loss of agricultural ponds. So following the Second World War, being quite a hungry nation, we changed our agricultural practices to be able to maximize output for food. And in doing so, farmers filled in ponds that they had at the borders of their fields or in the middle of fields that would act as traps to stop effluent and fertilizers running into the waterways to maximize the land area that they had available to grow more food. In the process, habitat for great crested newts and other amphibians was diminished significantly. Because of this, because of their protection, they get into arguments, as it were, with developers quite frequently, because people like to build houses for people to live in. And if you find a great crested newt, it can mean, additional millions of pounds of surveying and mitigation. But this is generally only an issue when the ecologist who does the ecological impact assessment report beforehand fails to find newts and all of a sudden one turns up. The issue there is that if you find one, is it just a stray newt, or is there a whole population hiding somewhere? So, there's a few issues that you have to overcome with amphibian conservation in the UK, to do with perceptions, to do with legislation, and to do with where species are found, etc. Now we're going to move on to the exciting bit, with the conservation side of things. And I know that everybody's looking for a reason to be optimistic in these dark times. So hopefully that's where I can help provide you all. So we have a few organisations here in the UK which deal with the conservation of reptiles and amphibians. We have FROGLife, we have the Amphibian and Reptile Groups UK, of which the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Amphibian Reptile Group is part of, and then also the Amphibian Reptile Conservation Trust. And all three of these organisations rely heavily on volunteers to do their work, but it's ARG UK that relies on them most. So each county in the UK has its own ARG, and that's run by volunteers, and all of the members are volunteers. And I want to show you some stories and some pictures now of what an ARG does to enable to help amphibian conservation in the local area. So one of the main things that we do is monitoring. And as you can see by this photo here, isn't the best photo, but it's the only one I had available, is a mat of common frog spawn. And so common frogs, like most anurans, they spawn, most temperate anurans, they spawn in the spring, and females will lay a single clump. And there's over 250 clumps here. It took a while to count, and we're probably underestimating there. And each clump can be up to 2,000 or more eggs, but only a small fraction of those survive. As I'm sure many of you that work in amphibian conservation know, frogs, the tadpoles, their eggs, they're a huge bounty for other animals to feed on. And so frogs play the numbers game. They produce thousands of young, and only a handful have to make it adulthood for that population to remain stable. So we go out, we count adults, we count the spawn, we count the young, and we try to figure out what populations are doing in the local area, and to manage them appropriately to be able to increase those populations and make the area more suitable where possible. So that's what this image is showing. So this image was taken on a very cold January day a couple of years ago. You probably can't see it. The pond in the background is frozen. There was about 3 or 4 inches of ice on the pond there. And what we're doing here as part of the team is removing a number of the dead trees around the outside perimeter to be able to let a load of light into the pond when spring comes around, to help increase the amount of macrophyte cover in the pond that will act as refuge and also nesting sites for amphibians and their prey. And so one of the things that we like to do is that, yes, we are altering habitats and managing them primarily for amphibians, but there are a whole host of other animals that can benefit as well. So if you're looking to get people involved with your local conservation effort, yes, you may be helping the frogs, but if they're more into the birds or the insects, etc., perhaps try to use that as a hook to try to get them involved. And I'm sure that people will be able to come out and give you a hand. As I said, the pond here was frozen. There was 24 of us working on this site that morning, and we managed to get a whole host of stuff done despite it was quite a cold morning. So it probably won't be a surprise to you, but roads are a huge problem for amphibians here in the UK, as they are around the world. And one of the issues that we have are these gully pots, and essentially they are drains that water runs off of the road into and then goes into an underground system to be transported away from the road area. But because they run almost up against the curb, if a toad, if a small mammal, if a newt falls in the road, and then follows that curb along, and then it meets one of the grill to the gully pot, it falls in and can't get out. They are essentially a concrete pitfall trap. And so what we've been doing in some areas is installing these towed ladders to be able to help any of the amphibians or small mammals that fall in escape. And this is being completed through community involvement, and thankfully we have volunteers in the area that are helping to monitor the situation here to see how effective these gully pot ladders are. They were designed by the British Herpetological Society. They cost about £15 each, and so far we've found to be quite effective. Although because of the ongoing pandemic, we haven't been able to collect any meaningful data yet, but it's still early days. We can still get some hopefully in the near future. And then moving on to that is tow patrols. And so again, you can see the conditions here are quite cold. I can assure you it isn't always like that in the UK. It's just the only images I had at hand. So common toads and some of our other amphibians make annual migrations to and from their breeding sites every year. They congregate in the breeding ponds, generally around the time of the full moon, when air temperatures are above 5 degrees Celsius. And there can be multiple waves of migration depending on the weather and a whole host of other climatic and lunar cycle variables. And one of the issues that they have is that in early February, when this all starts to kick off, is that at about 7 in the evening, when this all takes place, it's the back end of rush hour. So everybody's rushing to get home and not taking care on the road, and could potentially this can be a death trap for toads. So one of the things that we do is we go out at night on these roads. There's people doing something down the country. This is just my example, but we go up and down the road with buckets and high visibility jackets and remove the toads from harm's way and transport them to the breeding ponds, and then again do that when they are migrating back the other way once they've bred. So there are ways that you can get communities involved to help save the local amphibians. And then another big important part of what we do is outreach. And so, as has already been said, some of the newer generations aren't aware of the importance of wildlife. They're glued to their screens. They're not getting out and about and doing stuff that we all did as kids. And I think it's important to show people why it's important, why these animals matter, and try to form that emotional connection while they're young, so that when the time comes to it, they will fight for them. So that's what we do. We attend a number of local events and fairs, science festivals, whatever we can do to try to reach as many people as possible across all age groups and backgrounds, and try to make them aware of what's going on, B, it's important, and C, and more importantly, how they can get involved. And this is a photo of my colleague Mark, who's giving a workshop. So one of the other things that we do is we train people as well to come out with us to survey for reptiles and amphibians. And most of the time we rely heavily on these volunteers, as has been discussed already today, to go out and collect data. Unfortunately, we can't be everywhere all at once. So we have this army of volunteers to go out and monitor the local patch and feed data back to us. They can go into models to work out how populations are doing, or when's best to go out and survey for amphibians and reptiles. And so this example is a reptile one, again, mainly because it's easier taking photos during the day. And then afterwards, this group came out with us and we went out looking for common lizards along this embankment fence. So just up the top of the embankment, there's a major road. And then down at this level where we all are is this open area of scrubland. And on this fence along the margin, there tends to be a whole host of lizards basking. And so we were out there training people up in the morning, and then in the afternoon we're out looking for lizards. So we got everybody involved, and thankfully a lot of these people have carried on going out and surveying for both reptiles and amphibians since that took place back in 2016. And then finally, I just want to come on to the topic of disease before I take your questions. And so in the UK, we have, as I've already said, a number of introduced species of amphibians that could pose a threat to our native amphibians. This is one of them, the midwife toad, which I've done a lot of work with in the past, and I'm carrying on that in the future once all of the lockdown and quarantine restrictions are lifted. We've been screening the population in Cambridge for the amphibian chytrid fungus, as well as other populations around the country, and so far we've found no evidence of disease, which makes sense. These guys are one of the most susceptible European amphibians to chytrid, and so if a population can persist for a lengthy amount of time, then you expect them to be negative for chytrid. Also, if there was chytrid in an amphibian assemblage, then it will probably present themselves to these guys. And so far, we found no evidence that these guys are acting as a vector of disease to our native amphibians, which is good. And one of the current things we're working out at the moment is where these guys originated, which is part of an ongoing project that I'm hopefully going to be able to speak about more in the near future once we publish our results. So yeah, there's just a few things to think about. I haven't gone into anything to do with in terms of habitat creation or the reintroduction, head starting of certain species, just because I wasn't involved with those. I tend to do stuff on a very local scale, and obviously being a small group, you're limited by resources and time and people power, and so you learn how to maximize your efficiency with those to achieve as much as possible. So that's me done for now, and I'm happy to take your questions, and hopefully, I've inspired some of you to take action and try to get involved with local amphibian conservation in your area.
All right, thanks a lot, Stephen Alleyne. Fabulous work, fabulous photos as well. And Steve helped set up a Save the Frogs presentation for me in the UK in September. We went out looking for toads. So thanks for being here, Stephen. I posted a link to several of Stephen's articles that are on SaveTheFrogs.com, so you can go read those. And we have a question about B-sal, Batrachochytrium salamandrivorans, a chytrid fungus known to impact European salamanders. So the question is, has B-sal affected any UK newt populations at this point?
So one thing that we do know is that unfortunately B-sal is present in captive collections here in the UK. There was some research published a couple of years ago that looked at private collections of salamanders and found it present there. But one thing we do know is that it isn't present currently in wild populations, which is good news. However, because it is present in the captive and private trade, there is a chance for spillover into wild populations. So there is a push at the moment to try to increase people's awareness, keepers and amphibians, in terms of biosecurity, so that there isn't that that spillover, because people have been careless with their wastewater, or an animal, a sick animal has escaped into the wild and is potentially transmitting disease to native amphibians. So it is a worry. The risk is there, but at the moment, we're trying to do as much, people, myself, the organizations involved are doing as much as possible to prevent the spread of B-sal out into the wild. Were there any more questions?
Send in your questions. We've got 7 minutes, so if people have questions, send them in. And I'm looking through these. We've got some comments, but I don't.
I'm writing sorry because my voice is going, so I didn't want to break up halfway through talking to everybody.
Yeah, you're sounding good. So let's see. Any questions? Send them in, and we'll wait a minute. I won't make you keep talking if people don't ask questions. I'll go ahead and say, hey, everybody, we've got a SMS alert system. I send out Tuesday texts. That's one single text message to your phone once a week with whatever of importance is happening in the world of frogs and Save the Frogs. So go ahead. If you're in the USA and Canada, I believe it will work. Text frogs to 646-495-9867, and that'll get you on our SMS system. One text message a week. We've got Stephen Allane here, UK amphibian expert, and I believe knowledgeable in Malaysian amphibians. Perhaps sometime you can talk to us about Malaysian amphibians or prepare some kind of Malaysian amphibian photo, something or other, because I don't think we have much as far as Malaysian amphibians goes on.
Sure, yeah, I can definitely do that. Yeah, I can dig out some photos and yeah, talk about what's been going on. Okay, so questions coming about how are we preventing B cell spillover into wild populations? So yes, so some of it is to do with education, yes, but also there has been a push for people who are keeping captive salamanders to have their animals tested, and then once they know that their animals are positive, they can then treat them, put them in quarantine, etc., and go through the needed processes to be able to prevent the spread of B cell to the rest of their collection or to wild amphibians through spillover. And at the moment, one of the biggest issues that we have is obviously not being able to get out and survey for these sorts of diseases in the wild. So it's quite a scary time to be a conservationist, because potentially there could be spillover into the wild, and we're not there to be able to witness it and be able to mitigate it in real time. But I guess we'll find out once the lockdown's lifted. But as far as we're aware, all of the evidence suggests that things are contained to captive animals, and the risk of it escaping to and spilling into important populations is quite low, but it is still there. In terms of common frogs, Gordon, toads even, there isn't much government funding, I'm afraid. So common toads aren't listed on any lists as being endangered. They're least concern on the IUCN Red List. I think one of the things we need to do is work on a national red list for our amphibians, and also, as I'm sure you're aware, with a 68% reduction in population level over 30 years, if that was any other species, people would be throwing money at them left, right, and centre. So yeah, there should be, hopefully there'll be more funding coming in the future. But I think people who have a garden, who want to get involved with amphibian conservation, can do a lot to help toads in the local area, just by helping fill in the dots on maps, so we know A, where they are, and B, how we can help populations navigate obstacles such as roads or housing developments, and hopefully try to make them persist for the future, as opposed to just disappearing in the blink of an eye. I think that's everyone's questions now.
All right, a huge thank you to Stephen Allane from the UK. Everybody out there, you can go to savethefrogs.com/summit to learn all about our presenters. Go to the Meet the Presenters section, and if you find the presenter underneath their photo, there's some social links, websites, email addresses, so that you can stay in touch with the presenters. So go do that. And let's see, we've got 1 minute here if this question is relevant, but I am going to cut you off in precisely 1 minute. Meanwhile, I'm going to get Elliot going here, but feel free to answer this, Steve, if you want to, and don't if you don't want.
Okay. So the amphibians in the UK and France are essentially the same, although France has more amphibian species just because it's part of continental Europe, and so more have been able to move in and colonize the area from times before the last glacial maximum, where some of the area wasn't habitable to amphibians. And so yeah, we do share a number of our amphibians with France, but they have a lot more than we do.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Enjoy your Save the Frogs Day.
Got it.
All right, everyone. We've got Elliot Connor coming to us from Australia and is going to be giving us some good news for hard times. Elliot, welcome.
Hello there, everyone. Thank you, Kerry, for the introduction. I'm just going to start these slides. Perfect. Okay, yes. So in light of COVID times, I've chosen to talk about conservation optimism themes and specifically some of the learnings from my own work in how we can realign conservation to be more accessible, more inclusive, and ultimately more impactful. So I hope you enjoy. I'd like to start with 3 pictures. So this is a polar bear in Svalbard, Norway. This is your stereotypical symbol of climate change. So obviously the melting sea ice, the glaciers, which are causing huge issues for this species. This is a koala, as you can see in the face of the approaching bushfires in Australia. Again, a symbol of human negligence, destruction. And likewise here, this is the Tarkine forest in Australia, or was the Tarkine forest, as you can see. So these are the images, of course, we're surrounded by, we're most used to. They're the images of destruction, of negligence, of all the dark side of human activities towards this planet. So I'd like you to forget all that. Of course, we're well aware of some of the damages humans can cause to our natural environment. But far more important is if we can look at some of the success stories. So that's what I'd like to focus on. So I'll take you through this first. To give you some background, this is a short survey I did of several hundred environmental actions, activists, folks involved in these circles. And the idea was to test some of the common perspectives towards these related issues, what they might think about some of the conservation issues at hand and ranking them as well. So I'll just share that with you if you give me a second. So this was going all of last week, and as you can see, several hundred folks took part, but the results were actually quite astounding in some respects. So as you can see, quite an environmentally conscious audience. I was distributing it almost entirely through such circles, and the idea was to target specifically those already involved in the movement. The first question was, what percentage of forest cover has been lost in the Brazilian Amazon from deforestation in recent years? The right answer is 20%. So as you can see, we've got a very, very strong tendency to exaggerate, to dramatize, to see the worst in situations such as this, which can be great. So it can mean we get support for some of our initiatives, for some of our projects, but just as powerful can be the apathy of the results. So I think it's well worth keeping that in mind. This is obviously a very environmentally aware audience, but that obviously has very powerful negative effects in that it means they may not see some of their own successes. They might not be able to recognize that. This is my favorite question. So the question is, how many plant and animal species are there on Earth? And as you can see, nobody has the slightest idea, which is quite amazing, actually, given the audience this was pitched to. So like, the right answer might be billions, trillions, certainly not 1 or 4 or 25 even, or 369. But this just goes to show we do have some knowledge perhaps of conservation of related issues, but if we go back to the basics with natural history, it's quite patchy, some of what we know. This question people do quite well on. How many of Earth's species has science currently described? So people do have quite a good idea that a lot is still unknown. Of course, it's less than 20% that we've described. It could be much less, we don't know. but people are tending towards that side, which is very positive to see. This is another instance of conservation pessimism. So the right answer is it has less than halved. Poaching incidents of rhinos in South Africa over the past 5 years have gone down quite dramatically. So that's perhaps one of the conservation success stories you haven't heard of. So whilst we might have terrible things going on in the world, we might have chytrid fungus or illegal wildlife trade, then there's still things which we can celebrate. And I think one of the most powerful tools in conservation is if we can recognize some of our successes and build momentum from that. So it's much more powerful in attracting donors or getting volunteers to work towards a cause. This is my equalizer question. So as you can see, quite an environmentally literate audience, which it was pitched to, which is good to see. Biodiversity loss impacts 80% of the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the third answer there. And it's about random chance, actually, which folks got that. So 33%, almost random. So it's not a great knowledge, actually. And that's quite an important question because if we recognize that biodiversity loss is impacting all of these other development matrices, then that will have very powerful knock-on effects for how this policy management sort of discussions are run. I work a lot across changemaker circles, so they're often very, very surprised to see that question pop up. But if we can recognize that, then of course we'll have much more material to work with in combating some of today's issues. This is the pessimistic question, which people do very well on, because my answer is the worst one. So the abundance of animals has decreased by 60% since the moon landing. That's obviously a huge, huge loss. Amphibians are particularly badly affected, but it just goes to show that people do have quite a good knowledge of how biodiversity has been affected and some of the issues associated with it. It's just a matter of catalyzing that into the right actions. So really quickly, 40% of the world's economy is derived from ecosystem services. Again, people do quite well on that, which is great to see. Climate change, so how many degrees warmer will the Earth be by 2040? It's about 2 degrees is the consensus. So again, there's a decent amount of knowledge, but again, tending towards the pessimistic side, which is slightly alarming to see. It's about the same. Developing species, countries, have roughly the same amount of animal extinctions. So there's almost even answering between that, which is quite good to see. Shows people are willing to take the blame themselves, for example, for some of the issues we're currently facing. So that's great. This is one of the more shocking responses I got. So they were asked to assign 100 points between the following threats. So you might recognize these threats that were listed in the IPBES report in 2019. And the correct ranking was actually having changes in land-sea use, exploitation of organisms, invasive species, climate change. So they've actually got almost the inverse order, which is slightly worrying. So there's quite a large role you can see that media plays in some of these portrayals. Climate change, pollution are the most publicized issues of our times, whereas some of the more hard-hitting ones aren't so recognized. So perhaps when looking at all of our collective conservation actions, we can reframe those discussions to look at the true causes of biodiversity loss, not to look at those media grabbing headlines, but to look more holistically. And this final question, was around why humans might be considered separate from other animals. And I find this really, really inspiring to see all the different answers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a word cloud from it with all the different responses. But they range from, there's no difference to some really innovative, creative answers about some minor differences you might be able to pick. You can see a few of them here, but that's the smallest shown. So the reason I share this is I think working in conservation circles, we can be quite isolated from some of the other professionals in the field. So if we can just recognize some of those predominant viewpoints, that can be very, very powerful, actually. So I'll return to my slides. This is one of my favorite stories. You might have heard of Lawrence Anthony. So it's not a frog, as you can see, but Lawrence Anthony is famous for the work he did in elephant conservation. He started his own charity and it continues to move on after his death. But essentially what he did is he took on a herd of rogue elephants and gave them shelter on his own game reserve, risking his life and many thousands of property damage. So a very selfless act, putting these majestic animals first. But it does go to show how perspectives are changing. These dialogues which we're already involved in around environmental awareness are slowly shifting. And that's a very powerful change to make. So one of the closing thoughts I'd like to end on is around this sentiment of conservation's 4 Cs. So this is my framework of some of the intangibles I believe conservation needs to move forward with the due success, with the due impetus it needs. And I believe largely they're left out in many conservation actions. They're what I try and work towards to make all of my different projects very accessible, very inclusive to the general public. And I do believe we need to widen these circles we're working in. So connection is the first. I'm actually an animal rescuer, carer, which is both a blessing and a curse, because of course I see a lot of deaths, a lot of animals that sadly pass away. But what is really inspiring about it is I get to see members of the public from all across Sydney, where I live, ringing in to report these sick and injured animals, which just goes to show there's a tremendous amount of goodwill out there. So that drives me day in, day out. Second is curiosity, which is of course tied in strongly with the citizen science movement. This is about bringing people to the point at which they can ask questions about the natural world, learn experientially. The number you can see here is 1 trillion, so it's like the upper estimate of species on Earth. If you just think that's a huge number, we've described in the vicinity of just over 1 million. So there's a huge knowledge gap out there, which remains to be filled. But that's, I think, quite amazing for especially younger audiences to get them involved in these discussions. If we can quote statistics like that, how much there is yet to be explored, that's incredibly inspiring. This is about creativity. So it's the sort of business end of operations, trying to work with nature to co-design solutions to some of our pressing issues. All of these pictures collectively represent a field called biomimicry, which is essentially taking nature's blueprints and redrawing for our own human commodities and systems. There's the kingfish and the bullet train is the most famous example, where the nose part was reshaped according to bird lines, and that greatly reduced fuel usage, greatly reduced the noise it made. So that was quite an innovation. We're developing syringes based on mosquito proboscis. We're developing wind turbines based on whale fins. So these are just a few examples, but it's quite incredible what we can achieve with this technology. And the fourth and final is collaboration. So this is sort of where things fly or fall. We've got an enormous privilege of talking with fellow folks in this conference and in other events such as this in COVID times. The theory I try and put forward is that of mass individualism. So recognizing the power each individual has, but then connecting them across different networks for the maximum impetus is essentially the goal. So that's what Human Nature Projects is trying to achieve. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought. Was there any questions that came up?
Thank you, Elliot Connor. We've got like 30 seconds if a question comes in. Your interest and involvement in, say, the frogs. I will say that Elliot is helping me to do some video editing, and I am probably going to play the video that he just recently edited quite shortly. So you can add to that, but when the clock strikes the next minute, we're going to move on to Gilbert. All right, let's leave it at that. We are going to move on. Thank you so much, Elliot, coming to us from Australia down under. We have got Gilbert Adam on the line, Save the Frogs Ghana co-founder and executive director, amphibian biologist, winner of many grants and awards, savior of many frogs, inspiration to people all around the world. Gilbert, how's it going? Let's get you unmuted. I'm going to unmute you. Hi.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, great.
Feel free to share your screen. You're coming through clear.
Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Let's see. I cannot. Yes, it's coming through. We got it. Saving the last giant squeaker frogs.
Right. So it's evening in Ghana. Good evening from Ghana to all of you. Very excited to be part of this. I'll be sharing with you interventions that we've put in place to save this frog that is so close to my heart. Before 2009, this frog was thought to be extinct, and I started my master's in 2009, and my plan was to look for this frog, and this changed my life and also changed the life of this unique frog. I'll be talking about that, but before that, a little bit about myself and why frogs. So this is me up there. I graduated from the University of Cambridge a few months ago, and my thesis, I was looking at interventions that work for amphibian conservation, interventions that work and those that don't work. I looked at that for my MPhil thesis. But the question is, why frogs? I was born in the Savannah region of Ghana, and we lived basically on meat. For my tribe, we say all animals in the wild are for us. So you are free to hunt as many as you want. Growing up, we were using frogs for training. You aim at the eye, and once you are able to get it, then it means that you become a master hunter, and then you'll be graduated to hunt bigger animals. So I lived that sort of life for many years while going to school at the same time. But when I got to the university and then got back to the village, I realized all the places that we used to hunt frogs from, the ponds, the streams, the rivers, the frogs numbers were seriously in decline. I remember I contacted Kerry at the time, what we could do to save the frogs in Ghana. And that is also the story of setting up Save the Frogs Ghana. Ghana's amphibians. So we have about 87 frog species. I say about or plus because there are frogs that we've discovered newly, which we are yet to describe. But for now, we have 87 frog or amphibian species. The giant squeaker frog is one of these. And this is a frog, as I said, so close to my heart. In 2009, my team and I, we rediscovered it, found the highest population so far, 14 individuals at the time. But more importantly, we had the opportunity to study more about this unique frog. So the giant squeaker frog, like every squeaker, is squeaks. more like that. But the most important unique thing about this frog in particular is its size. People ask me why giant. Is it the biggest frog in Ghana? Is it the biggest frog in the world? But you'll be surprised to learn that its maximum size is 50 millimeters. It's actually a tiny frog, but we say it's giant because compared to the other frogs in the genus Atroleptes, it is the biggest. This is the smallest one, Atroleptes crusculum, which is just about 50 millimeters. And this is about 50 millimeters. So that is why we say the giant squeaker frog. This frog is distributed in a very tiny portion of the forest, less than 10 square kilometers. And we've identified that usually in places that it occurs, the leaf litter has to be thick, it has to be dense, and then the canopy has to be relatively close. And the place also has to be hilly. It's usually found along the slopes. Then the question is, why is the frog facing extinction? Why is it so much in trouble of extinction? The number one is clearing of habitat for farming. Where I stood here, I did my master's thesis right in this spot. At the time, it was a dense forest where I found some frogs. I went back to this same place a few years later, and this is how the place was looking. Another serious threat is logging, both legal and illegal logging. This is me. I arrested these illegal loggers, but even the legal logging is equally destructive. The logging companies are supposed to remove 3 trees per hectare, but they end up removing more, compounded by these illegal logging activities. After logging and after farming, you have this weed called the devil weed. The scientific name is Chromolana odorata. It's usually found in the gaps and degraded areas. It takes over, it depletes the leaf litter, and the giant squeaker frog depends on the leaf litter, as I earlier on said. That is where it breeds, that is where it survives. But then this weed takes over the leaf litter, and the frog is not able to live in those areas. The worst part about this weed is that wherever it grows, as you can see here, you will never find a native tree growing there. It inhibits the growth of all native plants. The weed fuels forest fires. Almost every year, we record a number of forest fires in these forests, in this forest in particular, because of the invasive weed. But all is not bad. We've been able to do a lot to be able to save the frog. The first thing that we thought of doing was conservation education. That is, these are the students and young kids we usually involve. For the adults, sometimes you talk to them and you think there's no hope at all because they give so many excuses. Poverty, that is why we have to depend on the forest for our needs, and our grandparents used to do this, so we also have to do this to survive. But then we tend to talk to the younger ones, and they are buying, they are receiving the message, the conservation message, and we think there is hope for this frog. Another thing that we are doing is to plant more trees. So this area, we planted these trees about 4 years ago, and already they are grown and the canopy is closing. So far, we've planted about 40,000 seedlings or native trees to restore the habitat that the giant squeaker frog needs. What we are also doing is to fight the wildfires. So for instance, we provided mobile phones for community volunteers such that whenever there is a forest fire, then they blow the alarm, they call other people who come together to put out the fire. Another most important thing that we are doing is beekeeping, because the local people continue to give excuses, and I agree with them. The poverty level is so high, so they have to farm in the forest, they have to do logging in the forest to survive. So what we are doing is to provide alternative livelihoods in beekeeping. So far, we have about 200 families that we've provided these boxes, and they've already started harvesting the honey. We started in 2016, and so far, so good for the local people. We also think that if the frog and the forest will be protected, it will depend on educated people. So we started giving scholarships to poor but brilliant chaps. Just a few months ago, 4 of our students, they made it at the top of their various schools, and some come live on TV on national quizzes across the country, which we take pride in, because we believe the better educated they are, the less they will be depending on the frog habitat. So after a few years, what have we been able to achieve? This is me. I received this award in 2016 for being able to bring back the giant squeaker frog. As I talk now, there are about 40 individuals that are known from a species that was thought to be extinct. 40 is not much, but at least we know there's hope that the species will survive. Quite apart from that, we are also creating a protected area. We want logging to cease, we want farming to cease, we want all kinds of extractive activities to cease in this forest reserve. So we've done surveys on reptiles, amphibians in general, birds, butterflies, mammals. We've even discovered 2 new butterfly species that we are working on to describe. And this also gives us, it boosts our competence or capacity to be able to get the forest created as a protected area. Finally, we also provided an amphibian education center. We stock these places with books, computers, and we engage IT professionals to teach the kids how to use computers, and then also engaging them in classes that will boost their educational prospects. So the very final one, so Carrie was here in 2016, and the 2 of us, for the work that we've been doing, we were made chiefs. And that has actually given me the opportunity, the authority to be able to get this forest protected in a way that the giant squeaker frog, we know we will not get lost or will not be lost to the world. I will want to thank all our supporters and our sponsors across the globe for all that they've been doing to help us to save the giant squeaker frog. And I also thank all our donors who have been giving to us individually. Without your help, we wouldn't have been able to protect the giant squeaker frog. So I thank all of you. If there are questions, I'm here to answer. Otherwise, thanks so much.
All right, a huge thank you, Gilbert, Adam, for all of your efforts. And thanks for giving that presentation. We still have plenty of time, Gilbert, so we'll wait for questions to come in. If you have more pictures, I request you to open up your slideshow to full screen so that we can really see everything. We have
Okay.
Gemfy coming up next, and she'll be talking about some other Save the Frogs Ghana efforts. So as we wait for any questions.
There's something worth mentioning. So for the population assessment and monitoring, we are using a unique method. So the first picture you see on the belly, you see patterns. So usually when we find a frog, we try to count these patterns. And the next time when we catch a frog, every frog has its unique. That is one thing unique about a giant cricket frog. Every frog has its unique patterns on the belly. So this is also what we are doing to be able to know that this is an individual, a different one, or is another one that we've gotten before. And I'm happy to report that a few months ago, we recorded 2 gravids, or let me say pregnant in plain language. We found them with eggs, which was very exciting. For the first time, 2 individuals that we found to have eggs. And we know, although we've only found about 40 individuals so far, we know now the population, because we made sure that where we found those individuals with eggs, we made sure that that place is well secured and protected. People don't have access to that area, and we hope the rains have just started, and we'll be going to the field to look at, to risk survey all these areas. And we hope that in few months, we'll be able to report good news about more numbers for the giant squeaker frog. Okay, so that is it for now, just in case there are questions.
Gilbert, you have been conducting a lot more than just amphibian surveys in the last year. Why don't you tell everyone about those?
Great. So this is the gray parrot. The gray parrot, the first picture you see there, about 99% of its population is in decline. In other words, about 99% in Ghana has been wiped off. But I'm happy to report that we found this bird, this endangered bird, in the Sea Forest Reserve. In total, we found about 90 bird species occurring in the forest reserve. For mammals, I'm also happy to report that the Western chimpanzee, a critically, let me say our cousin, we also, through interviews, we were able to find that just a week before our surveys, local people spotted, this is not a picture of the chimpanzee anyway, but local people spotted the chimpanzee. And the experts we contracted to do the surveys, they also recorded raiding activities of the chimpanzee. In all, we had about 40 mammal species known to occur in the forest. I already said something about butterflies. For butterflies, we recorded 277 species, including 2 that I thought to be endemic or new to science. So all these data sets and important records give us the hope that we can push to get the place created as a protected area. So in fact, we are only using the giant squeaker frog as a flagship. We are doing more than the giant squeaker frog. And amphibians in general, we know 31 species to be occurring there. Just 2016, a frog that was thought to be extinct for over half a century, having been spotted in Ghana, we found it in the Sui River Forest Reserve. So we are using this data, pushing hard on the government and the logging companies. And we know that given a year, this year, by the end of the year, we will be able to get the forest created or redesignated as a protected area. That is okay.
All right, we've got.
And
Yeah.
yes, with the forests, the degraded areas, about 40% of the Sui River forest has been degraded or even deforested. There are places that are just bare, but we are lucky that the local people, actually when we started with the local people, we'll plant the trees. Then after a month we'll find that the seedlings, some seedlings were dead. We didn't understand why until someone hinted us that local people were pouring hot water and killing the seedlings. So that made us to have a rethink that it was better to provide alternative livelihoods for the local people. At the time, we lost about 5,000 seedlings. But when we started engaging the local people, providing alternative livelihoods and living with them and interacting with them on a daily basis, we won back their trust. And now I'm happy to report that we have most of our seedlings thriving very well. Yes, so that is it for now.
All right, Gilbert, a huge thank you. Everyone out there, go check out savethefrogs.com/Ghana. And I'm going to chat in. There's a brand new page you've probably never seen. savethefrogs.com/Ghana-photo-gallery. Go check out some awesome Save the Frogs Ghana photos there. And let's see. If you've got questions, bring them in. Send them in. Sandra Owusu Jemphi, Save the Frogs Ghana campaigns coordinator, will be on in exactly 8 minutes. And let's see, so I'm going to recite some frog poetry for a minute or two. Once I get the book up. All right, Little Book of Frog Poetry, Volume 1. We're Counting on You by Sean Cordes. Help me please, I'm in despair. You found me here because you care. Although you may think frogs are fine, our numbers are in sharp decline. From chytrid fungus and invasive species to frog-legged lunches and infectious diseases, we'll disappear and fade away unless you help us here today. There's time to act, but it's up to you to spread the word and save me too. We're Counting on You by Sean Cordes from the Save the Frogs Poetry Contest. Now, the Save the Frogs Little Book of Frog Poetry Volume 1 is available, downloadable. Lots of poems, lots of awesome frog art. Where would you download it? In Save the Frogs Academy. That is at savethefrogs.com/academy. what's in Save the Frogs Academy. Why don't you all chat in? How many of you have checked out Save the Frogs Academy in its recent incarnation, which is about 1 month old? How many of you have never been in there? What's in there? There's 1,800 pages of amphibious information and at least 15 hours of Save the Frogs presentations, with a lot more coming. We've got presentations on Ghana's amphibians in there, and looks like my flag didn't make it. Save the Frogs Academy, you get 28 days free. Even if you're not a member, just go to savethefrogs.com/academy, sign up, 28 days free, full access to all those courses. It's a ton of frog education, and it's completely free. Spread the word about that. There it goes. Hard to find tape in this day and age with stores closed, so that's what we get. But hey, it's a southern orange-eyed tree frog in it. At least we have him still. So let's see. 5 minutes to go. Everyone take a break. I'm going to play some music for a couple minutes. And meanwhile, first off, I am going to hand over some controls to Sandra to make sure she is set up. All right. A huge thank you again to Gilbert. Let's see if Sandra is on here. She is. All right, Sandra, you're now a co-host, so go ahead and prepare your screen, and we'll have you start in 4 minutes. But right now we'll have a musical interlude. Play a little bit of bamboo flute. May as well just get rid of those. It was good while it lasted. Thanks, everyone. That was Rag Bimpalazzi, classical music of northern India. coming up in a couple hours, we have 3 hours from now, we've got several presentations from India coming your way. So I'll probably play some more music then on my bamboo flute. Bonsuri, thank you, Elmer. All right, let's see what's going on with Sandra. Let me turn this off. All right, Sandra, I'm gonna unmute you. We are at start time. Sandra, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
How's it going?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I cannot see you. So
Oops.
if you can, I'll ask you to start video. There it is. So if you want to show your video.
All right.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
You're coming through. All right. So tell us all about Save the Frogs Ghana campaigns, specifically Ghana's Atiwa Range Forest in bauxite mining. And if you are prepared to share your screen, you're welcome to do so. And I encourage you, instead of having it in PowerPoint edit mode, blow it up to full screen if possible.
All right. Carrie, can you please permit me to share the screen? It says host disabled participant sharing screen.
All right, let me see what's going on. All right, you are a co-host. You should have access now.
All right. Is this okay?
I don't see it
Can you
yet.
see my screen, please?
I cannot see your screen.
Okay.
Do you see the share screen button at the bottom?
Yeah. Can you see it?
I can see it. Yeah, so it would be good if you open it up to full. Yes, right there. All right. Thanks for being here to tell us all about the Atiwa Range and Save the Frogs Ghana.
All right. All right. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Kerry, for putting this together. We are finding ourselves in an unfortunate situation, but I think we are all doing our best to keep safe. So I'm going to keep my presentation very straight to the point. It's about what Save the Frogs Ghana has been doing over about almost 10 years now, what we've been doing to protect one particular area in Ghana for frogs, for biodiversity, for the people of Ghana, and this is in Ghana. So just as a bit of introduction to what Atiwa Rainforest Reserve is, it's an upland forest reserve, which we have two of these kinds in Ghana. Atiwa is one of them, and then there's also another one called Tanofin, all in southern Ghana. Atiwa covers an area almost 24,000 hectares. It's there are about 30 communities surrounding Atiwa Rainforest Reserve. It's also the only home to a new species that we recently discovered, not Save the Frogs, but a colleague of ours, which is called the Phainobactrachus efiabirago paddle frog. Sorry. Atiwa Rainforest Reserve is also the home to the last viable population of the Togo slippery frog. This frog, I think most people have heard about it because Carrie and a group of other scientists and Save the Frogs, we've actually advertised the Togo slippery frog to the world. Came for an expedition in Ghana a couple of years back. Atiwa also provides water to 5 million Ghanaians. Interestingly enough, this represents about 16% of Ghana's population. So that tells you how important the forest is to biodiversity and to the local communities. At least there have been about 11,000 plant species recorded in Atiwa. It's some of these species recorded are endemic to Ghana. Some of them are found only in West Africa. It has the highest butterfly species diversity in West Africa. So Atiwa, we can say, is unique because of its other areas in Ghana cannot support. The only problem we have is Atiwa sits atop an estimated 150 million tons of bauxite. And as you would expect, every country will be interested in harnessing or extracting these resources to develop the nation. And by so doing, what's going to happen is Atiwa will no longer look like this because government is going to turn this beautiful place into something like this. Now the screen that I'm sharing with you actually is an area here in Ghana. It's the only area in Ghana where bauxite mining has been happening almost a century now. And if you go on the ground, the local people complain. They
Hi, I think we lost Sandra just now. So let's see if she returns here. She probably just has to log in again. And meanwhile, if people have questions, or perhaps in this unexpected moment in time, if Gilbert is out there and wants to say something about Atiwa while we wait and hopefully get Sandra back in here, then Gilbert, you are welcome to. Hi, Gilbert.
Hi. You want me to say something?
I think so, until Sandra returns. Oh, she is back, but let's see if she comes on. All right, I think we have her back. Hi, Sandra, can you hear me? I'm gonna unmute you. You are
the
unmute.
connectivity is quite, yeah.
Hi.
And then to share the screen, please. I'll have to speed up then. Can
Yeah.
you please give me permission to share my screen?
Is that?
Hi.
Hi, Sandra. Is your share permission on?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, so back to where I was. So the Ghana government is going to receive about $15 billion from China, and we are going to have to pay this amount back with our bauxite. So it's more or less a barter trade system that is going to be implemented. As of last year, middle of last year, Atiwa was one of the most intact forest reserves we had. But then by 3rd June, we information coming in from who've been working with our partners on the ground, Arusha, Ghana, that they had noticed bulldozers in the forest reserve already clearing the land. Now, the issue with this kind of activity is that when government wants to take up any kind of activity in the forest reserve, it needs to extensively consult with local community members and the chiefs. We didn't see this happening. Land in Ghana, as we know, it's owned by individuals, by families, by the chiefs, not the government. So if there's the need to do any kind of activity on the land, government needs to actually get the permission from people. So without this, it's quite a shock that government go ahead with it. We made progress with the previous government to get us to make Atiwa a range forest reserve a national park. And by so doing, that would have made sure that Atiwa was a no-go area for any kind of extractive activity. This is in no way referring to the fact that the previous government was for our cause. We are not a political organization. Every government has the right to develop the country and make use of the mineral resources on the land. But what we are asking for is that it has to be done in such a manner that there's broad consultation and there's regard and respect for the environment. So when we got this information, it set off a chain of reactions. One of the things, the very first things we did was to organize an immediate press conference. We called together a couple of partner organizations. And can you hear me?
Hi, yes, we can hear you. I actually
all right. Okay, my feed got off, so I thought, yeah.
You'll have a better audio sound with your video off.
All right then, okay. So we had a press conference. There's a local coalition which they call the Concerned Citizens of Atiwa Landscape. They joined us to have this press conference to tell government that in no certain terms should they continue to pursue this agenda without broad consultations. We followed this up with a petition to Ghana's parliament. And what we were asking Ghana's parliament to do was to use their power sort of to see if government was working or operating within the confines of both national and international treaties like the Convention for Biodiversity. So the man in the blue suit, he actually is the majority leader of Parliament, Honorable Mensache Bunsu, who received our petition and promised to send our petition to the floor of the House for debate. We didn't see this happen. We followed these things up with street protests, with several people joining us from communities, from universities, from other CSOs. We had our students helping us to campaign. What we have is a student standing on the streets that leads to the presidential building. So the very road that the president would use, these were the places that the students stood at with signages and telling our message and making sure that the politician sees our message. We issued several press statements. The media took up our cause. They published what our messages. We had communities also on the ground protesting. Several community members saying that we don't want you to destroy the forests because it supports our livelihoods. And this is the forest that our ancestors left behind for us to benefit and enjoy. We want our children to also continue to benefit from them, the forest. There was a 95-kilometer march. This was actually put together they are carrying, representing the various communities and how already there are illegal logging and mining activities at Atiwa. So the effect these ones are already having on their water and what the implications will be if they should have bauxite mining in Atiwa. And the one thing about bauxite mining is it involves open top removal. So the forest at this peak will have to be completely cleared to make way for the extraction of bauxite. It's not the same process as in mining gold or other minerals. They submitted a petition to government, and in all certain terms, they were not going to, they didn't wish to compromise. And I wish to be able to read a bit of what they said or circulated. They said, I wish I can read everything, but my screen is a bit covered with pictures here. This is, so in a nutshell, they talked about how much the exploration activity ongoing at Atiwa has already destroyed about 100 football pitches or 100 soccer pitches. And what this represents is that the people not knowing what has, without consultation, they did the exploration activities, and they are asking and demanding what happened to the trees that were cleared from the land, what happened to the money, and if they didn't see the money, what are the guarantees that if they should encourage or promote any bauxite exploration or mining activities at Atiwa, what will be the benefits to the local communities? We've had several important people add their voice to it. We have had Leonardo DiCaprio say that and called on Ghana's government to desist from the exploration activities. We've had popular Ghanaian artists, we've got a former Musicians Union president of Ghana supporting our cause. He actually marched with us to Parliament. We also joined a lawsuit with our partner organizations, Arusha Ghana, and several other, about 20 other individuals and civil society organizations. And what we were asking governments to do is that they should exempt Atiwa from the bauxite exploration activity, because Atiwa, per what we have, the information we have, is going to contribute just 20% of the bauxite that government needs or requires to be able to pay back the loan that we've collected from China, or we are collecting from China. And that's ongoing activities at Atiwa, all exploration activities at Atiwa should stop immediately. In all of these, we've not really had much breakthrough or access to government. We've only had communications, messages from the state through the information minister, saying that the exploration activity or the method that will be used is going to be friendly, is not going to destroy anything in the environment, in the forest. But we never ever got the opportunity to know what technology they were talking about. But fortunately, after we kept pressing and demanding that something be done about our request, we got the Union Development Corporation, GIADEC. Now, this is the body that government has set aside to develop an aluminium industry in the country. So they are one of, I would say probably they are the most important stakeholder when it comes to the bauxite exploration activity. And for almost a year, we were trying to have an audience with them. It wasn't successful. And so we beefed up, or we upgraded our method of campaigns. Now, if you're expecting to see anything on this screen apart from the name of the corporation, unfortunately, I can't see anything. We had a closed door meeting and we were told that it was everything that was going to be said in the room was confidential. We can't bring anything out. So more or less we were gagged. You can't, but then we did mention our fears and why we don't want Atiwa to be included as part of the bauxite mining operations by government. And I can say that the final decision though is that we will try as much as possible, both parties, to have frequent monthly meetings so we are able to trash out our differences. We cannot say that we've come to the end of the campaign just because we've been able to meet with the corporation. So what we are going to do, the first thing we are going to do is continue to mount pressure. That's the only thing I think government understands. We've had several people sign, we've submitted signatories, we've had the US Fish and Wildlife add their voice to it, that Atiwa be protected. It should be at least a national park. We've had the Christian Council of Ghana also add their voice to it. So we've got several stakeholders who are in support. Of course, there are other stakeholders who also want the mining to go on, especially when thousands of jobs have been promised to people. So the first thing we are going to do is mount pressure. The second thing, we'll still mount pressure. And our third method, if you guess right, we'll continue to mount pressure. I think that's the only thing we have up our sleeves now. We don't know any other thing else to do, but we believe that at the end of this, nature will win. We are not going to let government succeed. Hopefully, if we get out of this COVID-19, we will continue with our campaigns. We've not stopped though. We are monitoring what's happening on the ground. So yeah, that's all we've done so far. And I'd like to thank you for having me and bearing with my poor connectivity. So if there are any questions you would like for me to respond to, I'm happy to do so. And thank you, Kerry, for the pictures.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For 7+ years, I believe, of Save the Frogs Ghana efforts and all your other environmental work. Why don't you go ahead, stop your screen share, and if anyone has questions for Sandra regarding campaigning, being a female in science, anything about West African amphibian conservation, a Tiwa forest, bauxite mining, dealing with the government, getting students involved, starting and managing Save the Frogs chapters at universities. All right, Margot up in New York holding her own Save the Frogs Day event. A frog artist. Activism is not easy and can be dangerous. And kudos to you, Sandra. Very inspiring. Thank you, Margot.
Carrie, if
Yeah.
I can respond to what Margot said with the
Yeah.
dangerous lobbying training with Arusha. Arusha organized it actually. And then right there, we had the Bureau of National Investigation come around. It was outside Accra. And that was not the first time. Actually, Arusha had talked about the Bureau of National Investigation coming around. I think there had even been threats on them. I haven't received those yet, thankfully, but it goes to show how it can be quite dangerous if you are working in the area of lobbying as an environmentalist, especially in Africa.
All right. Well, I was muted for all those inspirational words I was saying. I was saying, among other things, Choti, thank you for your statement, which is Sandra, thanks for all you do, not just for the frogs, but also for women and the environment. And I was speaking about safety and environmentalism. Sandra, keep up the fabulous work. Everyone, I sent out links to various articles about and by Sandra Owusu Jemphi. All right, thank you, Bernie, who says, Sandra, thanks for your excellent work. Do you have any information on the ecosystem services provided by the area? And are you familiar with the Ghana Beyond Aid office with a name like Data Driven Decisions that's run by ID Insights? All right, we'll see if Sandra heard that. Sandra.
Hi.
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 Hello.
Yeah. Can hear you. Hello.
Hi, Sandra. I was reading Bernie's comment. You may be able to see it, a couple different things. Do you have information on the ecosystem services provided by the area is the first question.
Yeah. Yes, there has been an extensive work done. So if you Google online Tiwa Rainforest Reserve Ecosystem Services, they use this method TEEB, the Economics of Environmental something TEEB, TEEB. So there's been an extensive work done where they compared 4 scenarios: business as usual, and Atiwa plus buffer areas as a bauxite. It looked as if bauxite wins. Bauxite provides more, but in the long term, the national park with the buffer area provided more because it's for longevity. Yeah, Carrie just shared it. Thank you, Carrie.
There's one article, and it does mention the TEEB. Okay. And then the second half was, are you familiar with the Ghana Beyond Aid office with a name like Data Driven Decisions that's run by ID Insights?
I'm not familiar. I know about Ghana Beyond Aid as the government has been pursuing, but I'm not aware of their office.
All right, Bernie, perhaps you could send in a relevant URL, or if you want to unmute yourself or have me unmute you and actually say something, then we're open to that, because right now we have a break of 1 hour and 45 minutes. So if there is something, or if anyone, I'm fine to open this up a little bit more, not just on Sandra's topics, but if anyone has questions about anything, we have a few minutes before we will take a break and resume here at 5:30 p.m. Los Angeles time. That is 8:30 p.m. Washington, D.C., 9:30 p.m. in Brazil. And on the savethefrogs.com/summit page, you can go click convert time zone here for any of the talks coming up. We've got a lot more to come. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you, Bernie. Let's get you on here, and maybe you can give a brief introduction into who you are. Let me find you. Give me 1 second. All right. Hi, Bernie. Welcome.
Hey, Carrie. Thank you. Thanks for putting this together. It's great to hear about this this impressive work that you guys are doing. I am a conservation biologist at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I have a lab. And then I've started a few conservation organizations over the years. One was called Island Conservation. Another one is Conservation Metrics. And most recently, I've started a new organization called Freshwater Life that does invasive, invasive freshwater species eradications to protect endangered freshwater species that are threatened by invasives. And Sandra, I really liked your talk. Thank you. And I know a little bit, at least in theory, from outside of Ghana, what we hear is that the president is really keen to develop the country, and that he started this office called the National Office of Data-Driven Decision Making. And he hired a really happening organization called ID Insight to help start the office. And they're bringing really talented people from all over the world into the office. And the goal is for government policy to be data-driven. And so if it seems like that might be an avenue to, look at the potential benefits of the bauxite mining as opposed to the long-term costs within the national park or protected area. And if you like, I could make an introduction to one of the people that work there, if it would be useful.
Hi, Bernie. Thank you very much. We would love to have as many collaborations as much as possible. So yes, we would love that. But with the assessment reports, it was submitted to government. There were policy briefs and a whole lot of things that were generated out of that. But that was with the previous administration.
Right.
So the problem or the issue we have is we now have a different leader who seems to have a different kind of direction, is going in a different kind of direction. All right. So that is why it seems we've done all these things, but we haven't actually been able to get to the final goal of getting Natiwa into becoming a national park.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I shot you my email, and so if you look into that office and it seems like maybe a useful avenue to apply some pressure,
Okay.
let me know and I can introduce you to someone who works there and is at least
All right.
Interested in conservation issues.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi. If I ever talk and I'm muted, you don't have to wait a few minutes. Oh, okay. Looks like two people told me that, so I apologize for that. I've got background noise, so I try to keep my mic off. First, I was thanking, I thanked Sandra for being here and her efforts, and also I was thanking Bernie for the tip he gave me, which is that UC Santa Cruz was offering some full scholarships, I believe, to international students, and I pass that information on to Save the Frogs volunteer Biraj Shrestha from Nepal, who won that scholarship and has spent the last 2 years at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And Biraj will be speaking at 9 p.m. Los Angeles time. That is, I won't try to guess, that's 5 or 6 hours from now. So let's see, thanks to Bernie and thanks for your advice just now. And on that note, I encourage everyone to donate to Save the Frogs, especially if you've never donated to Save the Frogs before. We'd love to have your first ever donation. This is a huge Save the Frogs World Summit event educating people around the world at no cost to anyone. Anyone can join this for free. And your donation helps in many respects. And if you want that donation dedicated to our efforts in Ghana, then go to savethefrogs.com/donate. That should have been a slash right there in that link I sent. Donate and then just email contact at Save the Frogs or Ghana at Save the Frogs and say, please dedicate that donation to the Ghanaian efforts, and we'll send that to Ghana. So on that note, we have about an hour and 35 minutes of break. We will resume with David Montiel. That will be a speech, a presentation in Espanol, in Spanish. If I can figure out how to get Zoom's translation functionality working, maybe I'll translate that in the background. But that will be in Spanish. And then there's about 15 minutes after that. And then we'll have several India presentations. So let's have a little musical outro, and then I'll see you in an hour and a half. So this is my Vietnamese jaw harp. All right, thanks everyone for being here. That was round 2 of the Save the Frogs World Summit, and I will see you soon, hopefully. Please go ahead, spread the word, social media, tell people you're on the Save the Frogs World Summit, savethefrogs.com/summit. People can still register to attend. We've got it live streaming on YouTube on that page. And if you're on Twitter or Instagram, use @SaveTheFrogs, even better than #SaveTheFrogs. And I will see you soon. And I may go ahead and stop this meeting. You'll have to log back in, use the exact same login link that you used before, and I'll see you in about an hour and a half. Save the frogs.